Okay, so the semester's work begins in earnest now. We're going to talk about the things they carried. You might think that it would make more sense to talk about the plot first, but actually I think the plot is a little bit more complicated than talking about some of the characters, so we're going to start with the characters first. If you've looked at the literary terms in the fiction unit, you might have noticed flat characters and round characters and static and dynamic characters. And if you didn't look at those, maybe you know those terms already. A flat character sort of only has like this one trait, right? Not all that interesting, and probably isn't doing a lot of changing. A round character has, sort of like a more well-rounded character, right? They have more characteristics going on. They might be more complicated. A static character doesn't change throughout the course of a story, but a dynamic character does. So let's try to figure out who the main characters are in the story, right? So who are those people? Who is present in the war, and who's maybe a character in the story that's not present in the war? And are these flat or round characters? Are they static or dynamic characters? So first, let's start with Jimmy Cross, right? I think it's fair to say that he is not a flat character. I think he's got a lot of stuff going on, right? I'd say he's round. He's got a lot of details about him. He's not just a caricature, right? When I think of a flat character, I think of someone who's just sort of like a cardboard cutout filling up space in the story. They serve a purpose, but we don't get a whole lot of information. But actually, Jimmy Cross is probably the main character in the story, right? We start the story with him. We finish the story with him. Even though Ted Lavender dies and is a big feature of the story, I wouldn't say he's the number one character. So I'm going to say that Jimmy Cross is a round character, and now we have to figure out, is he static or dynamic? So if this were a real class, this feels a little bit weird. If we were in a face-to-face class, I would ask you. So think about that for a second, and I would venture to say that he is a dynamic character, right? Because he changes. How does he change? Think about that. He changes at the end of the story, right? What does he end up doing? How does his relationship with Martha change? And how does his relationship with the company change? At the beginning of the story, he's obsessed with Martha, right? He knows that she's not in love with him, but he still holds on to this relationship to a point that he thinks it's interfering with his command, right? Then Ted Lavender dies. He sort of reassesses his situation, and in the final couple paragraphs of the story, that final section, he decides to leave Martha figuratively and literally behind, burn the photographs, maybe leave the stone or do something to the stone, the little pebble, leave the pebble behind, and start to be more of a hard ass about his command, right? So Jimmy Cross, probably a round character. We've got a lot of details, and he makes a change throughout the course of the story. Now Martha, she's not actually present in the war. We're only getting, we never really meet Martha herself. We're always getting secondhand information about Martha. So do you think that she is a flat character or a round character? Even though she's not actually present in the war, I would say that she's a round character. I find her to be really fascinating. All of this separate but togetherness, I mean, she seems like a very complicated person. She seems very real. She seems to understand what a human relationship is or is not. It's not this perfect, idea of romantic love. She writes to Jimmy Cross. We don't really know why. Is it cruel that she continues to write him even though she's not in love, but probably knows that he's in love with her? Is she doing it because she pities him as some sort of support mechanism for him? I don't know. But I think she's a very complicated character. So I would say she's definitely round. There's a lot going on with Martha, and she's one of my favorite. I teach this story in my comp courses, and in my comp curriculum, she's probably one of my favorite characters because there's a lot of stuff going on up here. She contradicts herself a little bit. She sends the letters, but she doesn't love him. She signs it with love, but doesn't love him. There's all this stuff going on. So I do think she's round, but is she static or dynamic? Does she really change throughout the story? And I don't think we have enough information to say that she does change, right? We have the Martha at the beginning of the story, and she's basically the same Martha at the end of the story. Her influence changes Jimmy, but I wouldn't say that she actually changes, right? So I think that we have a very real, very interesting character in Martha, and she's round. She's, there's a lot of detail about her. She seems very real, but I don't think that she really changes, right? We don't know enough about her. All of our information is secondhand, so she's just sort of off in the distance as this very real character, but I don't think that she changes. Now, we've also got Ted Lavender. And although Ted is a big part of the story, I feel like he's a very flat character. What do we know about Ted? We know he carries a lot of dope, he does a lot of dope. Why does he do the dope? Because he's scared. He's scared probably because he's in the war, right? That makes sense. But we don't know a whole lot about him, right? So I think it's safe to say that he is a flat character. And although his, physical presence on the earth changes throughout the story, he goes from being alive to being dead, I don't think that there's any real change in the character of Ted Lavender, right? So I think we have a flat character who is a static character. So it's kind of funny to think that, at the center of the center of the plot point of the story, like the main event is Ted Lavender dying, right? So in a way he's a main character even though we don't have much interaction with him, but he's actually a flat character and he doesn't change. So it's funny to think about that. He's at the center of the story, and then we've got Martha, who's not even in the war, and she's a far more real character, at least to me, than Ted Lavender is. So I find that really fascinating because he's at the heart of the story in some ways, but in some ways he also feels like a cardboard cutout, right? That he just, he sort of has his place in the story. It makes sense that we don't have more details about him because that would take away from the Martha and Jimmy Cross relationship. So, his presence serves a purpose, but he seems pretty flat on the surface, right? Now those are our main characters, but I also want to think about, the company as a whole. Like you have these guys in a war, right? And we don't know a whole lot about them as a whole. We don't know really anything about them beforehand, but we do know how they act in war, specifically how they deal with death, right? Is it Dobbins, who's usually a gentle man but carries the thumb of the Vietnamese boy, right? Who's carrying some ammo and a gun. So they have this very weird relationship with death. What happens when Ted Lavender dies? Well, they're kind of callous about it, right? They make jokes about it. They say he fell like a bag of cement, a bag of bricks, things like that, right? So there's not this real emotional connection. Now, can we blame them for that? I mean, they're in war, right? We're going to get to all of the death that they probably experience when we talk about the plot. But all we know about them is what they're like now and how they respond to death. Do we feel like they respond to death differently now when they're in the war than they did before they entered the war? And although we don't really have that information in the story, I think that they probably have changed. How does war not change a person? So I think if we look at the company as a cast of characters, I think the company in some way is a dynamic character, right? Because, if someone, when they're back in the States before the war, if one of their friends died, they would deal with it in a very emotional way, and they would not make jokes about it. They would really take time to grieve. Now that they're in the war, they don't really have that luxury, right? If they grieved over Ted Lavender in the way that they would, outside of a war situation, they would be so emotionally attached and they would never be able to move forward, right? Jimmy Cross is emotionally attached in this other way to Martha. He's sort of mourning the figurative death of the relationship, and he can't, it keeps his mind out of the war. So they don't have the luxury of mourning death in the wars the way they do beforehand. So I think that if we look at the whole company as a character, I think from the beginning of, from them before they're in the war to where they are now in the war, I think they have also changed. So, and I think we get more or less details about different characters. I wouldn't say they're necessarily flat. Some of the items that they carry give us good details about them, and I think that they've changed. They're probably slightly round characters that do change. They don't change a whole lot during the course of the story, but I think they have to have changed a little bit from when they entered the war to where they are now in the story.